Hi, this is our fourth art stream. Today's episode, I guess, is featuring Alondra, my fiance, and Grace, our little nature explorer expert.
And Josh's amazing sister.
Yes, Grace.
I'm sorry, I'm nervous.
Grace, why don't you tell us what we're gonna be drawing today?
Okay, so today we're gonna be looking at some horned larks, and this is a specific type. There we go. Specific type of bird that we've got here in North America. You also have them in parts of Europe. So you've got them in the U.S. and Canada, all over in the Western Hemisphere. Here in America, we usually call them horned larks. We might get other names in other parts of the world, but that's the main name you'll get here. And as you can see, Josh has zoomed in on the lark itself. Part of the reason it's called a horned lark, if you look carefully on this specific bird, you can see it's got some feather, almost plumage. There you go.
Ooh.
You got some feathers kind of sticking up on the top of its head that make it look kind of like it's got horns on it. And some individuals might have feathers that stick up a little more. Sometimes the males will have that a little more obviously sticking up off of their heads. The females tend to be a little more subtle color-wise, as well as some of the horned feathers on the top. This doesn't necessarily mean that they have horns, or necessarily that that's where their ears are. It's just an interesting kind of distinguishing mark on these specific birds themselves. As far as North America goes, they tend to live year-round, kind of in the lower 48, so most of the main continent U.S. And then when you get further north into parts of Canada and Alaska, they tend to be there more so kind of just for breeding purposes, so mating and then having and raising, laying eggs and raising chicks and such. But yeah, here in California, most of California, you'll get them year-round. The specific picture that Josh is working on here was taken by someone with Joshua National Park, in Joshua National Park, so actually here in Southern California, in part of our desert ecosystem that we've got going on between Riverside and San Bernardino counties. But they can also grow in other ecosystems around California and around the U.S. You get them in prairies, where you've got a lot of like grasses, like grasslands, different types of grasses and smaller plants like that, where trees are a little more sparse or separated. You also get them in fields. Some places you'll even see them near airports or places that have a little bit of greenery, but maybe not all the way covering the ground. You get them on the sides of like the shores of lakes and things like that. The ocean, potentially even shore habitats. You'll get them on the tundra too, and that's where you'll see that kind of that breeding season viewing of those birds in places like Canada, Alaska, Northern Europe.
What do they eat, Grace?
Good question.
So
these guys, as you can see, it's got a shorter beak. They're overall about the size of a sparrow or a robin. So if you've seen a sparrow or robin around where you live, it's about that same size. So they're not super big. They're not going to be eating things super big usually. But yeah, they're going to eat smaller things like, let me see if I can find it in my notes.
I like how blurry, like the blurriness that you made it around the edges.
Softness.
I think it's really pretty. Yeah, it's the softness.
It almost looks like. Actually, let's not look at my chicken scratch.
It's beautiful.
This one.
So usually these birds are going to be foraging. Oh my goodness. That's a J? Is that an I or a J?
It's an I.
Oh my goodness.
Always remember. No, I'm just kidding.
And
Oh my
it's also
goodness.
named Alondra, so.
Yeah, so
Okay, I was
part
like,
of the
never mind. Cut. No, I'm just kidding.
So part of the reason why we picked this bird is because when you say the bird's name in Spanish, it's
What are my colors doing over
Alondra cornuda.
Mm.
And
I'm just kidding.
since we've got Alondra here on the stream, we decided we'd talk about an Alondra bird or a lark. But no, this is not in memory of Alondra or a specific horned lark. Anyway,
Let's go in a different conversation.
these birds.
Let's cut to commercial. No, I'm just kidding.
There are no commercials.
There are no commercials.
These birds are foraging birds, so what that means is they're gonna be looking around their habitat for what's available and easy to get. When they're feeding young, they're gonna be looking for something that they can bring back to them, because the babies, when they're first hatched or even when they're not quite fledged, they're not ready to leave the nest. They're gonna have to be able to have something brought to them and broken down for them to be able to eat, or they'll break it apart if there are multiple chicks. So usually they're going to be fed something smaller or broken up. Usually the birds are going to be foraging on the ground, so it's not like they're like a hawk sitting up high and then like soaring over something and grabbing it. Usually they're walking or running along the ground, kind of finding things that are closer to them there. Sometimes they'll even look for food kind of in groups, and that might help kind of a lot of eyes looking for things. They're mainly looking for seeds, so small things, either seeds from like plants specifically, or potentially even what we would consider weeds. Seeds from weeds or grasses or things like that.
Okay.
Or if you're in an agricultural area, there are farmers and others that have like grains that they grow, like cereal crops or things like wheat or stuff like that. That once they've harvested the main grains for actual like use and distribution, sometimes they'll have what's called the waste grains or the waste crops that's kind of gonna not be used for that sort of thing. And sometimes the birds, if they live near an area like that, they will use some of those because they're kind of easy to grab. They're not going to be having to take them off the ground directly or off of the plants if they're close to the ground.
Ooh. So does that mean they eat like cereal?
No, not quite.
Oh.
But a lot of them are cereal grains are things like oats and wheat and stuff that we might use in cereals. But they're also like main crops that are distributed worldwide for various nutritional reasons. Yeah, so a lot of the grains, or you think of like driving through Kansas or somewhere like that and seeing a bunch of like the wheat fields or the corn fields or some of that stuff, then at least some of the grains would be in that kind of category. Some of the tall grasses that are used for their seed or for their stock or things like that. Yeah. So these birds will eat seeds or things of that nature. They'll also eat insects, so things like spiders, snails. They'll even go after berries, so some of those berries will have seeds in them, but they've also got a little bit of extra nutritional value depending on the type of berry that they're eating. And again, most of these, since they're foraging, they're looking for what's available near them, not so much going super far away, flying to another area of the forest necessarily to get that. It's going to be down nearish to where they're nesting and their main kind of ranges. As far as chicks go, obviously we've got some eggs that Josh will be potentially drawing in a little bit. So with birds, oh, there they are. With birds,
Babies.
Usually when you've got a grouping of eggs in a nest, sometimes there are birds that'll lay eggs a couple times during their egg laying season, and usually each grouping of those eggs, so say you have a bird that lays 3 eggs early in the season, and then maybe they don't hatch, so they lay some more later. Each of those groupings of eggs would be called a clutch. And so here we've got a clutch of, I believe, 3 eggs that Josh will be drawing.
So anytime they're in a group, they're called a clutch?
Yeah, so you might say they've got a clutch of this many eggs, and that just means that's the set. If you think of, like, sometimes people will say a litter for puppies or something like that, it's kind of that idea. The clutch is kind of the group that were all laid together and are in that nest or whatever it is they're keeping them in. So yeah, those are the eggs. And so these clutches tend to be kind of in 3s to 4s. Sometimes they'll have even 5 eggs in a clutch. And as you can see, they're kind of a pale grayish tan. They can also be kind of greenish white on like the base color of the egg, and then you'll get blotches or spots with browns and tans and things like that. And I believe part of that is just kind of for camouflage. A lot of bird species, their eggs kind of are colored or patterned in a way that helps them to hide a little better within the material that they're being laid in, or the ecosystem that the animal lives in, just because that helps to doubly protect the eggs from being eaten or seen as easily by predators while they're being incubated or cared for before they hatch. So these ones right here, obviously they were taken probably when the bird was away briefly getting something. But yeah, usually they'll be colored in a way that kind of is going to be a little harder for someone to see them. And often when the parents know that there's still potentially little baby birds kind of growing and incubating in the eggs, they'll be a lot more present at the nest. Usually you'll have females sitting on the eggs for a certain amount of time. Sometimes the males will just come and bring the females food. Sometimes in some bird species you'll actually have the parents switching off for kind of shifts, you could say. So you'll have like the night shift, one bird's there most of the night, and then another one comes and it relieves them at some point, and then they switch again. So it's cool to see kind of the way that these guys kind of take care of their little ones even before they hatch. Yeah, usually this species, it is mainly the female that's going to be sitting on the eggs. The males might bring food for her to have enough strength
the males might bring food
to keep watch over the eggs and keep them warm.
They might eat a little first, and then it might get them.
Oh wow.
Often.
I mean, in my experience, that's probably what it would be.
Oh wow. I'm sorry, guys. Continue.
Often these eggs are kind of gonna be laid in the spring. So with these birds, they tend to lay the eggs in the early spring, and so it could still be kind of chilly. So having a bird just sitting in one spot trying to keep eggs warm takes a lot of energy, both to keep itself kind of warm and secure, and then keep the eggs as well. So having a partner bird helping with that is very good for them. And then you've got
Yeah, that's biblical.
Yeah, and then what does the male do, you might ask, while this is happening? Is it just the female doing the work? Well, the male is helping to protect the nest, because there are predators that are bigger than these guys. If you think about it, I said that the horned lark's about the size of a sparrow or a robin. So that's not a super big bird, not a super tiny bird, but there are still things like hawks. If they live in ecosystems that have hawks, they'll have crows or ravens that might also be looking to eat the eggs or harass the parents or do whatever. You've got squirrels that might get desperate depending on what the weather's like in early spring. So you've got a lot of different
You hear that, Zach?
animals.
The enemy.
Oh wow.
You may have a
Cute
lot
enemy,
of
but-
different potential predators or nuisances around these nests that the males are going to usually be helping defend. Obviously the female is kind of the last the last line of defense because she's the one actively sitting on the eggs. But the male is able to kind of be more mobile and scare off some of those guys, as well as communicating stuff to the female from where he's at. So they've got different calls and songs that they'll do. They are songbirds. So just like robins or sparrows, they do have different songs they do. And some of these might kind of coincide with maybe the time of day or things like that. And then some of the calls they do are also just communication between each other. So the male might communicate something to the female, like, hey, watch out, there's potentially an intruder coming, or maybe communicate, I'm coming with food, or, you know, things like that. There are several different things they might try to communicate, and sometimes you can tell kind of some differences in the way that they call to each other, or sing even. And they'll do that both when they're sitting or perched on a branch or something of that nature, and they can even call when they're flying, so you'll hear some whistling and singing kind of from the air.
I'm trying to whistle or
Trying to
sing.
be one with the bird.
I'm trying to be the bird. I'm just kidding. I'm done.
That's official. That's an official call.
It's an official call. Communication, people. If I learn anything, communication.
In the right form.
So most of these
Knowledgeable.
birds, oh my God.
Knowledgeable.
Most of these birds specifically will put their nest kind of on the ground, either in clumps of like grasses or even in dried up cow manure.
Oh,
Just something that's kind of a bit of a formation that they can put a divot or something like that in to sit the eggs, keep them cushioned with feathers and dried grasses and things like that, but also protected. So if they're in a prairie or grassland where there's not other cover, they're going to utilize what's around them, and in that case it's going to be the grasses. If they're tall grasses, that's even better for hiding their nest from predators. So they utilize the surroundings
That's why I like
to
the
their
swamps.
advantage.
I'm just kidding. I said maybe that's why I like swamps, Grace.
Yes, sir.
She's like, I'm done. I love it.
Some birds will even have what they call a doorstep, so they'll take pebbles and put them on one side of the nest as kind of like, that's where you enter type of thing. They'll line it with things like that, with grasses, with pebbles, with feathers, soft feathers for the eggs. Yeah. Once the chicks hatch, then, like I said, they're fed by their parents. And usually they'll stay in the nest for up to 9-12 days. Takes a little while for their wings and feathers to grow so that they're able to actually fly. Because if not, then you're stuck on the ground where you're more vulnerable to predators. These specific birds, I said sometimes birds will have several different clutches. With these ones, usually they'll have one set each year. And then, if they're in the north, more toward like Canada and Alaska, they might only have one clutch of eggs that they take care of. Some places further south where it's warmer, maybe a longer potential spring, summer, daylight seasons, then they might have a couple more broods or clutches of eggs that they take care of and raise to maturity or ability to fledge or leave the nest.
What about, do they come in different colors?
So most of these guys are going to be similar-ish, but it partly depends on how old they are. So some birds start out looking completely different from their parents, and a number of them, even as they're maturing, they may look still different from the chicks. and the adults if they're adolescents. So in the case of these guys, they're kind of a little bit like that. So the adults tend to be kind of, some people will say they're kind of squat looking, so they're kind of like short, and they've got short legs compared to some birds. They tend to be kind of tans and browns. You'll get a little bit of white on the underbelly area, the underside, and then you get some black markings and some kind of yellowish markings in the face area. And again, the males tend to be, at least of this species of bird, a little not necessarily brighter because it's not a bunch of bright colors, but just more kind of showy colors compared to females who tend to be a little more muted tones. And part of that is likely because those females are needing to protect the nest and the eggs. It helps to have colors that are more subdued so they can blend into the grasses more. It's harder to spot them amongst their surroundings versus the males, which may also be hard to spot if they're hiding in grasses. I mean, if you look at the picture that Josh has of the bird, it's similar colors to what's in the background, so it would be harder to spot it if it's sitting kind of in a partially shaded spot amongst grasses and things like that.
There goes. Not bad.
So yeah, a lot of the coloration with these birds especially has to do kind of with helping them camouflage a little bit. They tend to be more browns and blacks and whites and tans and maybe a little bit of yellow. When they're adolescents, they tend to not have that kind of black and white horned look. They're more kind of brown all around. Yeah, and they'll have kind of white speckles too. So they'll kind of be brown all around, maybe a darker brown on the top, and some kind of whitish feathery speckles kind of on the back and some of the top of shoulders, and then on the head a little bit as well. And then as they mature, as they grow older, then they'll start to develop those black feathers around the neck, near the eyes, and then kind of as like a crown or a headband. And then you've got those little feathers that can tuft up to look like horns as well.
And can you have one of these as a pet in your house?
That I don't know. You might accidentally end up with one that gets stuck in your house if it somehow finds a way in and can't find a way out. But you'd probably have to look up for your state if there's any law prohibiting or allowing. But these guys are wild animals, so I wouldn't say, yes, definitely take them in your house, because I don't know that they would like that much.
Be like, hey, I'm an Alondra, you're an Alondra, come on now.
But if you had one in your yard, you could say you've got one in your yard. But yeah, these guys are wild animals. Usually with wild animals, you don't want to immediately just go out and start messing with them. Because a lot of animals are going to be afraid of you. Some of them might not be, though, and sometimes...
That's when you should be scared.
Sometimes those that
Just kidding.
are supposed to be in the ecosystem around you, if you get too close and mess with them, that can disrupt their natural behavior, and that can be bad for them. Sometimes it can mean life or death for them. So if you've got them in your yard, look, don't touch, as I tell my students. Feel free to enjoy the beautiful creation outside your window, outside in your backyard, but don't just go up and start touching the birds or the eggs.
Pew, pew. I'm just kidding. I'm calling you.
Unless you're a scientist who has special permits to be doing stuff with certain animals, and you know for sure how to deal with them, I'd say don't just start touching things and messing with eggs and stuff like that. Okay.
Come back. Just kidding.
If you've got a bird feeder, though, you may look up some of the bird species that are in your area and see what types of things they eat, and then you can start putting some of that sort of stuff, if possible, like seeds and nuts and stuff like that, out in a bird feeder. And that provides the birds in your neighborhood, in your area, with some sort of food supply that's a little potentially easier for some of them to get to, especially in those months when some of that food may be a little more scarce on the ground.
Have you ever seen one of these, like, where you work at?
I can't say that I have.
Mhm.
It's possible that they're there.
Mhm.
But we have so many birds that I hear and don't always see, just because I work in the woods. I work in the mountains where there are a lot of tall trees and short baby trees that kind of cover some of the ground and some visibility. So I don't know that I've necessarily seen these guys, but it's possible. I do volunteer at the San Bernardino County Museum, and I know we've got at least a couple, if not several, clutches of eggs that were collected back in the early 1900s in different parts of California by a couple different collectors of eggs. And so I have handled a couple of those eggs at the museum. And we had actually at least one set that was on display for a while in our biodiversity hall with a number of other egg clutches from different species that are found in San Bernardino County in Southern California.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that museum holds a lot of stuff. So.
Yeah, at one point, I don't know if this is still true, but at one point I think we had the third largest oology collection. Oology is like the study of eggs, especially birds' eggs, and so I think we had one of the largest bird egg collections in either the country or the world. I don't remember the exact statistic on that, but we have a lot of eggs in collections.
That my favorite thing about that museum is like the little, like when they do the little calls with the little birds.
Oh, yeah.
I was like pressing the buttons and being like, "Oh, what does this sound like? What does this sound like?" And then I try to mock it. Most of the time, I don't get
So
it right.
Alondra's spirit bird is the American mockingbird.
Oh.
The northern mockingbird.
The northern.
She likes to listen to other calls and repeat them.
And repeat them. That's very true and very accurate.
No, at least when she's at the museum, she likes to imitate the mockingbird.
Josh has
and
a couple of
mock
videos.
all the other birds.
Let's not put that in there.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe in post we'll have
Wow.
It's looking good so far, Josh.
I know, it's
Thank
looking
you.
amazing. You got it spot on. So good.
Yeah, so we picked these specific pictures because it's a cool example of kind of the side, a bit of the profile as well as a bit of the front of the bird itself. As well, oh my goodness, as well as some of the eggs visible. Now the specific picture, like I said, of the bird is from Joshua Tree National Park. The specific picture of the eggs is from Yellowstone National Park. So two different parts of the country. You've got the southwestern United States, specifically the desert, one of our higher elevated deserts in California. And then you've got Yellowstone National Park, which borders parts of Wyoming, Montana, Idaho areas. Also near Grand Teton National Park. And located in an area with you've got meadows, you've got forests, mixed forests. The picture that's the background for this stream is a part of Yellowstone, and it's got some of your conifer, cone-bearing trees, and then it's also got deciduous trees, which means these are trees that lose their leaves in the fall. That's why it's called fall. In the autumn, and they change color. So the picture in the background is actually a picture probably taken in the fall or maybe early winter or something of that sort, when the leaves of some of the trees have changed to like kind of a yellowy color. Some of them may be orangey as well. And you'll get that in parts of Yellowstone and other forests and places like that where you've got mixed bunch of different types of trees. It's geothermal areas, you've got like hot springs, you've got mud pots, you've got geysers, you've got all that stuff going on there too. And you've got good amount of diversity in both of these national parks, both these ecosystems, both in the desert, in the forest, and both provide good sources of food for these birds. So you've got seeding grasses, you've got bushes or shrubs that have berries, you've got even trees that might have seeds or things that are available for them different times of the year. And then you've also got insects in various numbers depending on time of year, available both in the ground, on plants, in plants, all these different places that help these birds to survive and even thrive in many ecosystems.
Wow. And she's not even looking like at anything. She knows this information so good. I'm like, wow, I'm so impressed. I'm learning. I'm learning as you're reading. That's crazy. Wow. I didn't know that about these birds. What would you said that they're not too small and not too big, right?
Yeah, so they're if you think of like a sparrow or a robin, look at that, a robin.
Oh, okay, so it's like a good size.
Maybe about I don't know with leg length how tall they get, like standing straight up and down. But they're I don't know if you'd say medium size. Yeah, they're similar to kind of sparrow or American robin size.
Okay.
They are considered general horned larks are considered animals of least concern in the U.S. or parts of the world at least. So it means that their population numbers seem pretty stable. They're pretty numerous, so most places there's not as much concern about their numbers dropping or them going extinct. But there are some subspecies, so like more specific species that are experiencing habitat loss or other things like that are affecting their numbers, so their numbers are dropping. There's a subspecies of these guys called the streaked horned lark that is found in only certain parts of Washington and Oregon. And those guys are considered threatened species under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. And so that would be an example more specifically for a specific type of this general family, I guess you could say, genus of birds, species of birds even, that maybe there's a little more concern about because of their numbers dwindling faster than seems like would naturally or normally happen without requiring and seeming like they require a little bit of protection and additional assistance and keeping them from dropping too far beyond what would usually be recoverable.
Wow, interesting. I want to see one now.
Well, there are places where people have webcams or just bird feeders where they watch birds, and often they will see some of these guys visiting some of those places. You just kind of have to be looking for them, I think.
Do you think that if like certain zoos and stuff like that, or do you think that they have some of like this specific species?
It's possible. Some zoos or like wildlife refuges or reserves or parks like that will sometimes have some more native species of birds and other animals, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, things like that. And so it's possible some of these guys could be in captivity or at least more viewable to the public coming to an institution of that sort. Obviously there are probably some in museums as well because they've been around a long time on these various continents, so some of them have potentially been collected over the years to be specimens for education or research and been included in some of those collections. Yeah, I don't know offhand exactly where like this exact zoo necessarily would have them, but might be something to look into.
And can you find them in the swamps?
Maybe you might find them. It might be something you'd have to look at. So what I saw for the general range for horned larks, when you look at, if you're thinking like, so there's wetlands. Wetlands are a very important ecosystem that kind of bridges the gap between, if you're thinking like places near deltas where like rivers are emptying out into the ocean, they're kind of a buffer zone between the saltwater ocean and the freshwater rivers or other waterways. And they're very important ecosystems. If you're thinking specifically about like bogs and swamps and estuaries and things like that, that are more in the south, so like Florida, Louisiana, parts of like Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, like things like that. It seems like most of the North American horned larks that are in that area tend to winter there, so spend some of their winter there. They might migrate there occasionally, but you'd have to probably look specifically at what people are observing and what time of year they're observing them.
Okay.
Because it seems like that area isn't as constantly an all season, all year spot. It's more of a, you might see them commonly in the winter, you might maybe see them in the winter, but it's not as common. Or they might be kind of migrating through that area between where they're wintering and then where they're kind of breeding or something like that.
Nice. I just wanted to be like, ooh, swamp and horned lark? Yay!
Maybe. If you did a road trip to the swamp and you went through some national parks that have them, maybe.
Ooh.
Or some other ecosystems that have them, maybe. There are some in Mexico.
Oh.
So you can see them maybe in parts of Mexico and say, oh, Alondra cornuda.
La.
And over there. I don't know. But yeah,
Las
you'd
alondras?
probably have to...
La Alondra. Ven Alondra. I'm just kidding.
Oh my goodness.
That's kind of weird to say
We
my
find
name.
Alondra. We find Alondra with a bunch of them just around her singing
Las
it
Alondras.
as a choir.
Just kidding.
That might only happen in fantasy, but
And
you
movies.
never know. Our grandma
So
had
no.
some birds sing with her before, so
Oh,
You never
that's so
know.
lovely.
but yeah, you probably have to look specifically for the area you're going to to see if anyone's seen them there before.
You know where they're at? Okay. Are they, do you see them in the nighttime or more mainly in the daytime?
I believe they're what's considered diurnal. So diurnal means they're mainly daytime animals. So they're most active in the daytime. That doesn't mean you wouldn't necessarily see them other times of day, or like night or between kind of day and night, that sunset sunrise time. But a lot of songbirds, now not all, obviously there's some songbirds or birds with songs they do at night or at dawn and dusk, but it seems like most songbirds like this tend to be diurnal, so the daytime type birds. If they have a nest that they're trying to take care of, they may be a little more active at night, trying to just make sure they're constantly keeping the eggs warm, maybe shifting positions every once in a while in the nest, and then maybe if something, a nocturnal animal is trying to look for the nest, the male might be a little more active, trying to actively protect it. I don't know if he'd necessarily be getting food at night, but again, I'm not quite sure. I haven't observed these guys at night. But yeah, I believe they are diurnal, so daytime.
Diurnal. Learn a new word.
Yeah, so you might have heard of nocturnal. That's like the nighttime animals, like many owls, many bats, mountain lions, things like that would be nocturnal. And then you've got diurnal, which would be your animals that are more active in the daytime.
Okay.
Now that doesn't mean that they can't be active at night and vice versa. Nocturnal can't be active in the day. And it just means usually, naturally, they're most active at those times. But sometimes necessity or the circumstances around them kind of force them to be a little more active at other times as well. Season and stuff like that.
Ooh, okay. Well, I know. What do they like? Are they very independent, or do they like go with their families like together? Like, would you see them all together? Because I know you mentioned as far as the eggs, they're in the clutch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like when they fly and like they're ready to go, are they traveling in groups or do they travel like alone?
It seems like some of them will flock.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when you have a group of birds, you'll call them a flock.
Okay.
Some specific species have like other names for a group of that type of bird. These guys, it seems like, are just called a flock, and sometimes they will flock. If you're talking like it's winter time, they're looking for food. The flock might be looking in a field for food together, kind of walking and running on the ground, looking for seeds and things like that. Pieces of grasses with seeds on them. They will kind of fly in interesting patterns if they're disturbed as flocks, so they'll like quickly take to the air and then like do weird acrobatics and stuff, twisting and going super fast and stuff like that, and then making little like calls to each other, little sounds as they go.
There we go again. Just kidding.
But yeah, they not all of them necessarily migrate.
Okay.
Some of them might migrate more than others if they breed in a certain area, or they are looking for specific things in an ecosystem. And then some are kind of in certain places more year-round, it seems like.
Okay.
I don't know that they necessarily have one specific, like, this is when they all migrate together. If you're thinking of birds like Arctic terns, or insects like monarch butterflies, those guys tend to migrate long distances based on time of year. Humpback whales and some other types of marine animals will also do that. But these, I don't think necessarily all have an exact time that they migrate all together. Just some, maybe based on region or location within the continent, might migrate a little more based on weather or available resources, things like that.
Interesting. Oh, I like these little birds. Do you think like they're friendly like with other birds?
They make it along okay with some other birds. I mean, obviously, nesting season tends to be when most birds are most territorial or protective of their spot, their tree, their nest, their range. So you might get them kind of doing displays or like calling or distracting, or whatever their tactics are for getting predators or nuisances, neighbors away that are getting too close, neighboring birds, neighboring other animals.
And that's to protect their like babies, right?
Yeah, so it's usually to keep them away from the nest so that there's less disturbance. The eggs are more likely potentially to hatch. If there's a lot of disturbance, the eggs get moved a lot. They're more exposed to sudden cold temperatures. They're not being covered as well. Then they're a little less likely to hatch. Now sometimes they just don't hatch. They weren't viable or able to fully hatch to begin with. Maybe they didn't fully develop right, or they died early in the egg. And those aren't necessarily always things you can tell while the mother is sitting on them, because usually the mother is sitting on them and you can't tell until they actually start hatching. But yeah, it just kind of improves the chances of the eggs hatching. Without the disturbances and things like that predators and curious neighbors, neighboring mammals and birds and insects and whatever else might pose.
Now when the male is trying to, like, I guess, win over the female or whatnot, do they, like, have a specific way that they, I don't know.
Like courtship?
Yeah.
Type of thing?
Yeah.
I'm not sure on that. I did see that the females seem to be the ones that are preparing the nest. So they are the ones kind of putting together
Mhm.
the grasses and weeds and pieces of roots and plants and things like that are kind of helping cushion and
Mhm.
support the eggs once they're laid in that spot. It seems like the male does have kind of a special flight he does, and I don't know if that's necessarily during courtship. That's just kind of how he rolls with the female. But yeah, he seems to do like a steep nosedive almost, and then he'll like do some other twists and songs and stuff in there, and then he like hovers, and then he does some circling.
Grace, how again?
He dives down again at the ground. So that might be something that they kind of do as a display, but I don't know if that part of that's just like a defensive display or if it's they do some of that sort of stuff in the courtship phase as well before mating. But yeah,
This one almost looked like a little dance. We watched this little documentary not so long, like maybe not so long ago, but it shows like some of the little dances and stuff. It's kind of funny.
yeah, the different ways that animals court each other.
Yeah.
Some of them do dances, some of them sing songs, some of them build the best rock pile, some of them
I know.
make the best nest, some of them fly up in the air and drop food at the female, and if she catches it, if he throws it right and she catches it right, then it's good. Some of them
That one's a good one.
some of them just bring food, and if they bring the right thing, then it's good. Some of them, like the female comes and inspects what he's built, and if she likes it, then that's gonna be their nest.
Bob the Builder.
Some animals do other stuff that's maybe not as something we would want to happen to us. Like some animals pee on the female as part of the courtship ritual, which is kind of gross. But that's the way they were made to do it, and so that's how they do it. But yeah, there's a lot of creative ways that these animals communicate, that they court each other, they come together, ways that they find each other, ways that they defend their territory, all that stuff. Ways they get food.
Ways they get food? Yeah. So it seems like they probably, like, to get the food and the resources and stuff like that, they have to, do they travel for long periods of time, or are they kind of...
It might depend on how available food is, but it seems like they don't necessarily have to go super far. They're staying more or less kind of in their general area. If you think about, like, humans, it's maybe more like they're staying in their neighborhood versus going out to somewhere outside of their street or their neighborhood. For these birds, they're probably staying close-ish by wherever the food is. So they're foragers, so they're kind of taking what they can get near them if possible. They might be forced to go else a little further out if the food's not as easily findable or available.
Okay. And you said some of the bigger animals tend to be like the ones who like prey on these.
Sometimes. So some animals will eat if they're carnivorous or omnivorous. So carnivorous, obviously animals that just eat meat. Omnivorous animals that can eat meat but can also eat plants. So some of these animals might eat small bird eggs, or even small birds, medium birds. But it kind of depends on the species, maybe even the time of year, and how desperate they are. Some animals that are omnivores, that are kind of foraging or scavenging animals, might be, if they can't find other things, might go for some bird eggs, or maybe even an injured dead bird. And then some animals that are carnivores might go for the bird itself. Smaller things like lizards or stuff like that might go for eggs as well if they're something that'll eat that. It kind of depends on what it is. And some birds even, I don't know if this species does it, but some birds, if the egg doesn't hatch, the egg may end up becoming part of the material in the nest. So like the egg will eventually, it dies obviously and is not able to hatch, sadly. But eventually it'll kind of be broken down. Material will kind of crack and break down and just become kind of parts of the nest. I don't know that these birds do that necessarily. I don't know, sometimes animals might eat the remnants of those eggs just as a source of nutrients, protein, whatever else.
Mhm.
But I don't know if these birds do any of that sort of thing with them.
So almost like it can tend to like camouflage almost into the nest.
Not so much camouflage, it just becomes part of the nest. So, like,
Okay.
say you've got a bunch of eggs, maybe the shells, because all the birds hatched and then they eventually are going to leave the nest, those
Mhm.
shells kind of, as they move around, get broken down, and those broken down bits kind of become part of the nest material.
Oh wow.
So think of it like a mosaic of eggshells within the nest.
Mosaic.
But I don't know if these birds, how into arranging the nest these birds are,
Okay.
as far as like they'll arrange the shells or they just arrange other stuff around them. I don't know.
Do they tend to as soon as they hatch, do they tend to like these birds? Do they tend to like fly right away, like within a couple of weeks, or like what's the week span usually?
I think these take maybe a couple weeks and then they're able to fly. It seems like about 10 to 12 days they're incubated in the eggs and then they hatch.
Okay.
And then from there, there's about, what did I say?
It's looking good.
About 9 to 12 days, and then they might leave the nest. And usually they don't leave or fledge until they're able to fly and take care of themselves to some extent.
Okay.
So yeah, when they're leaving the nest, that usually means they're not going to be like away from the nest and come back. Usually, it means they're away from the nest and they're gonna kind of fend for themselves. So it could be that these ones are, once about just under 2 weeks is done after they've hatched, they've been cared for by the parents. They have usually probably gotten closer to that juvenile bird stage or early juvenile bird stage. So they've got those browns, those speckles. By that point, they're able to fly and at least do some fending for themselves, getting food, foraging on their own. Eventually, when they mature into adults is when they'll start to look for a mate, look for a place to make their nest, build their nest, things like that.
How far along do they become an adult?
That I haven't seen yet.
Okay.
It's possible I looked over it somewhere in the midst of all this stuff. But yeah, I haven't seen that just yet.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's also like a lot of information and stuff like that. But wow. Okay. Yeah, I think that was something that I wondered about, like how once they like hatch and stuff, like how long do they just stay babies and then they just like go out into the wild?
Yeah, some animals it takes a while for their babies to mature to the point of hatching or being birthed, or once that has happened to the point where they're separating from parents, if they do that, or parents if they do that. It all depends kind of on species. With these ones, it seems like they are a little faster than some birds in leaving, and it could be because they're a smaller type of bird. Their lifespan may not be as long as some birds overall, and so their kind of maturing stage is a lot faster because the overall lifespan is not going to be that long.
Do you know how
I'm not
long usually is the lifespan within this bird?
Let's see.
Just out of curiosity. Years, months. No, I'm just kidding. Usually years, no? I would say. I don't know. But it's looking good.
Yeah.
I like the colors. The shading is very, very much point spot on the picture. Looks good. Yeah. Wow. Who knew? So much information. Oh, what a bird. So cute. That's such a that bird is so photogenic. Photogenic.
I can almost say it's cinematic.
Cinematic, I know, my word. Cinematic.
When we were in Chicago, that phrase came out of Alondra's mouth several times.
Several times. I'd be like, this location's cinematic. Josh, you're drawing cinematic.
Birdomatic.
Hey, dramatic. Grace, what are you talking? Cinematic.
Yeah, I haven't found it yet.
Okay.
My computer's taking a moment to try to load my search query. But while I was doing that, I did notice the scientific name for the horned lark is Eremophila alpestris. Now, I don't know if I necessarily pronounced that properly because I think it's either Greek or Latin, but it was originally named by someone named Carolus Linnaeus. So if you've ever heard of the Linnaean system of kind of listing animals and putting them in categories and families, that kind of started with Carl Linnaeus way back in the day. Big person in the scientific history community, scientific community, as far as like history of science and naming things and categorizing things goes. And he actually assigned the name for these guys, the Latin name for them. And it means lark of the mountains. And that doesn't necessarily mean they're only found in the mountains. Often they are found in prairies, farmlands, places that aren't necessarily mountains, deserts. But
does that mean it's Alondra of the mountains? I'm just kidding.
Technically, yes. So when you're at camp in the mountains, you could say you're the
Alondra of the mountains.
Eremophila alpestris. But yeah, I think that alpestris is specifically in relation, a reference to the Alps, which is one of the tallest mountain ranges in Europe. And so I think that's kind of where that part of that name comes from, is similar name etymology or origin to the Alps. Like, of those mountains, it could be because some of those mountains have prairies where those birds are found. I don't know for sure where that comes from for them. But yeah. Fun fact.
Fun fact. Oh, okay. Is there something that they specifically don't like? Or like, yeah, like something that they like dislike, or they try to avoid?
Predators.
That's that one. So like you said squirrels.
Oh yeah, I don't know. It probably partially depends on the ecosystem, the habitat they're in.
Okay.
Because they can be in several different types of habitats, probably several different elevations, different continents and countries. They may have different predatory animals or other animals living within that habitat as well.
Okay.
So when you're talking about maybe they're in a prairie, then you might have things like snakes or lizards or other birds or even other different types of mammals that could pose some problems for having a nest on the ground. So those could be predators. Those could be maybe cows or horses or something, or people that could accidentally step on the nest if they aren't carefully looking or protecting or keeping things away from an area that has a nest. So yeah, some of that might depend on where they are, and what other things are there in the ecosystem or habitat with them.
You see, I remember one time as a kid, I saw a little nest and it was like at my reach, and then I saw the little eggs and they were like little ones, and I was like, Mom, I want them. But I just left them there because I didn't know if it was like a snake or anything like that, and I was like, I don't know about that.
Some snakes do have eggs. Some snakes actually give birth to live young. And then pretty much all birds have eggs of various shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
Colors, patterns, textures, things like that.
Oof.
Yeah, a lot of little ones. I mean, if you think of hummingbirds, have little eggs of various sizes and lengths. Yeah, there are a lot of birds with little eggs, and then there are birds with medium eggs. These eggs are kind of smallerish.
Really?
But not tiny. because the
Okay.
bird's not that big. That doesn't necessarily mean all small birds have small eggs, because kiwis are small birds, and they have big eggs.
Oh, really?
But yeah, these eggs I think are kind of a smallerish size compared to. I mean, obviously an ostrich egg is going to be gigantic.
Gigantic.
But yeah, these eggs will be, I think, maybe.
Oh, okay. So the picture demonstrates them as like a big.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're. I'm trying to remember.
It's like that.
Maybe that big? Yeah. Could be wrong with that. I am not currently looking at a thing that says they are this length, by this
This
width,
big.
this circumference. But yeah, I think memory serves right. They're maybe around that size.
Okay. Nice.
And they're speckled. Some types of birds we've got actually in like the Mojave Desert here in California, not this species, have eggs with speckles, but they're almost like purpley red speckles, which is really cool to see.
So now, when you say speckles, is that like the
The
dotting?
little dots, yeah.
Okay.
So if you think of like freckles, speckles, like dots, it's
Mhm.
kind of little dots, but they're not like equally distributed.
Okay.
It's almost like someone flicked
Paint.
tannish paint, yeah, on part of it, and then it almost looks like they got more dots, kind of more toward one end, at least on these specific eggs we've got in the picture.
You see, I always wondered. So when the speckles, is it part of like what is it?
That's the eggshell. So
Eggshell.
it's got just different colors within the shell.
So that's just
Is
how they
that-
come out.
Yeah, they come
Okay.
out that way. And I don't know all the processes that go into the shell forming, and stuff like that within the bird itself. But yeah, some eggs look really wild, texture and pattern color-wise. Some Native American groups, and probably other people as well, have an art form where they burn horsehair on pottery, and it gives it these really interesting kind of lines and patterns on them. And there are actually some birds' eggs that come out looking almost like they did that to the eggs.
Oh wow.
But it was just naturally coming out of the bird like that.
Hey, I have a random question. So this has nothing to do with this bird, but now that you say that, I'm kind of interested. Like, when it's a different animal, like, does it come out? If it's an egg, do some eggs not look like eggs?
Probably.
That makes sense?
Yeah, so if you think of sharks,
Uh-huh.
some sharks give birth to live sharks, and some sharks give birth to, so young sharks are called pups. So some give birth to live pups, and then some give birth to lay eggs. And these eggs are like egg sacs or purses or things like that, and they come in all different shapes and sizes depending on the type of shark or shark-like species. So some look like a twisty thing that almost looks like kelp or something with like a pocket in it. Some look kind of like a purse or something like that with like a pouch in the middle.
Okay.
They all kind of look slightly different. If you think of some amphibian eggs, they look almost like little jelly, almost like boba.
Oh, is it kind of like Finding Nemo?
Yeah, that's an example of some fish eggs from the clownfish.
Okay.
Yeah, so different aquatic marine species, bird species, reptiles, amphibians, things like that many of them have eggs that are different shapes and sizes and stuff like that. Monotremes are animals that lay eggs, but they're not really birds or things like that. They're more mammal-like. And they have eggs as well that are interestingly shaped and stuff like that.
Monotremes.
Monotremes. Yeah, so an example of that, let me just make sure I'm saying this right.
Monotreme.
An example of a monotreme would be something like so something like a duck-billed platypus or an echidna. Those are both mammals that lay eggs, so they're called monotremes.
Monotremes.
So they have eggs, and those eggs are going to look different compared to a snake's, compared to birds compared to whatever else that lays eggs you want to add in it. Yeah,
Okay.
so each of the eggs is slightly different, different thickness to the shell, different texture, color, shape, size, place that it's laid, way that it's laid, things like that based on the type of animal, species of animal habitat, things like that.
Now these horned larks, how long is the pregnancy for, or do you call it pregnancy for the time of the being of the
I
female
don't
having
know
the
that
baby?
it's super long for these guys.
Okay.
These animals. Some animals that kind of already are just waiting for like the fertilization that happens during mating,
Mm-hmm.
in order to lay fertilized eggs that will then be sat upon in the nest, and warmed and sheltered until they hatch. So I don't know that it's super long that they have like the eggs just sitting in them ready to hatch. Before they hatch them, if that makes sense. I think the breeding season kind of starts early spring, maybe late winter. They mate and then they lay their eggs sometime in the spring, and then they hatch and are raised, and then they fledge, and then they're off on their own. Yeah, so I don't think it's that long for these birds specifically.
Okay. I just wondered because I was like, wait, like humans, it's 9 months. But
Yeah, for
like,
humans, so humans
10.
and a lot of mammals, if you're thinking of the time period that they've got their little baby kind of growing in them, called the gestation period when it's in its mother, that's going to be slightly different than these guys, because kind of some of the equivalent is them being in the egg, and that's kind of when they're, even once they've been laid, they're still developing within that egg until they're ready to hatch.
Oh, okay.
So it'd be kind of similar, I guess you could say, to the gestation period for a human or an elephant or something like that. It's still maturing within the parent until it gets to the point when it's ready to be birthed out of the animal. In this case, they'd just be hatching out of the beyond the shell of the egg, even though it's out of the mother already.
Now, do you think it would hurt like a baby bird or something, like when it lays its egg or whatnot?
I think they're okay because they're protected within the egg itself.
Okay.
That outer coating, the outer shell is helping protect them,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's usually a yolk or something like that within that's providing like a nutrient food source for the little embryo of the baby bird as it develops. So that's why if you've got like eggs that, like chicken eggs,
Yeah.
it's got that yellow yolk, because that yolk has a high amount of the nutrients they need that's helping them to grow and mature within the egg without having to go out of the egg and get food. And so if you think of like humans have something like that within the amniotic sac that they're developing in within their mother. So it's a little similar in that sense, in that they both have kind of a protected-ish area that they're developing in with a food source of some sort. I mean, obviously humans have an umbilical cord that's connected to their mom with that added nutrients stuff, but they kind of similar in that they've got kind of a protective outer thing around them. They're just not in their mom the whole time.
Got it. Oh wow. I wonder, like this is just like me being curious, but like I wonder if like the bird, like, is it the same way where they get like extra hungry? Like I'm just like thinking.
I don't know about that, but it definitely takes energy to do the different things that the birds do. And so that is part of where the foraging comes into play, both for the female and the male.
Mm-hmm.
If the female's laying eggs, or she's laid the eggs, she's sitting on the eggs, it does take energy to do both of those things, so the male might be aiding in getting food while she's busy doing other things that prevent her from being able to be out on the ground foraging when she needs to be by the nest or at the nest.
Okay, yeah, I wondered. I was like,
yeah, I don't know about feeling hungry necessarily, but there is a need for some of the nutrients and the energy that comes with some of the foods they eat
okay,
in doing those things.
got it. Yeah, I was like, I wonder if they get more hungry or something. Oh wow. Okay. Nice. Well, now I'm really curious about animals and like a little bit more about their whole process. That makes you really think. Wow. Berries. Now, would it be like for like you mentioned that they eat berries.
Mm-hmm.
Like berries that you find at the store, like specific.
So probably whatever berry bushes or shrubs are growing
Okay.
in their ecosystem. So if you've
Nice.
got wild blueberries, it might be blueberries, but it could be cloudberries. I don't know. It could be manzanita berries. It could be blackberries. I don't know. Whatever is in the
Wild
ecosystem that in the habitat that is something they can reach when they're foraging, they might grab those, unless they are poisonous to that bird and like the bird somehow has a way of knowing that, they might not eat those. But yeah, they probably have some way of knowing what of those to eat, and if they don't, then they get sick or die from it. But yeah, there probably are berries within some of these ecosystems that they are able to reach and to utilize as a food source. So.
Do you? Oh wait, but you said like sometimes they don't know if something's poisonous, and then
I don't know. Some animals are able to tell, like not to eat something because of its coloration or other stuff about it. Obviously, some ecosystems have things with berries that are poisonous for certain types of animals. Like for us, there are certain types of mistletoe that are poisonous to us, and mistletoe has berries. So for us, we see the mistletoe and we know, oh, don't eat that berry.
Right.
But for other things,
Instead,
like
people
birds,
think, let's kiss under it.
but for some things like birds, they can actually eat the
Stop,
berries
Josh.
and digest them and be okay. But that is an interesting way that some plants actually reproduce, is they depend on animals to help distribute their seeds. So things with berries, things with fruit that carry seeds in them, those seeds are taken to new places by the animals that eat them, and then when they poop the seeds out, then those eggs now have a new location, and if conditions are right, they have the right nutrients either in the poop or also nearby. They get water and soil and whatever else they need, then they can grow into new stuff. So that is one of the roles that some types of birds have in ecosystems. Is not only are they inhabitants of them, but they also help to further some of the populations of plants and things like that by helping distribute the seeds to new places.
I don't know about y'all, but after talking about so many like food thingies, I'm like, I'm getting hungry. I'm like some berry pie, some berry muffins.
She said, go ahead, go down to the store, get yourself some berries.
Get yourself berry shake. Ooh, do you still have berries? Berry ice cream. Float.
The same thought as each other.
Yep, that sounds good. Yeah, taco berry. That sounds great. I didn't know that mistletoe was poisonous.
Yeah, some species are poisonous to people.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some people say the reason that they kiss under mistletoe is because back in the old days, I don't know who thought this or when they thought this, but some people say it's because back in the old days they thought mistletoe was so poisonous, if you stood under it, you'd die. And so if you saw your loved one under it, then it was like, kiss your loved one goodbye, because this is their the last time
That's
you'll
so
see them.
sad.
Womp womp.
But there are other stories that go with mistletoe. There's like mythological legend stories that go with mistletoe and why some cultures kissed or did things with the mistletoe or stuff like that. But yeah, that's one of those plants that you see in decorations but don't always know that much about it.
Oh my gosh. And they sometimes sell like real mistletoe, like
some species of mistletoe are also partial parasites, so they actually grow on the sides of trees and on the bark, like, and their roots go into the bark and actually take some of the nutrients in the water from the trees
Oh wow.
that they're using.
Crazy.
The space, yeah.
Oh. Yikes. Mistletoe. Did not know that. You just think like, oh, it's cute, you know, but wow.
Yeah. But some mistletoe is also important for some ecosystems.
Yeah.
There are certain types of birds in places like the Mojave Desert here in California that depend on mistletoe berries as a food source. And the mistletoe benefits from that because then the birds poop out seeds and the more mistletoe can grow. But yeah, so there's some things that even we would find not so great that actually are beneficial to some organisms or benefit from others. Yeah.
Cool.
Some still don't do as much helpful stuff that we can see for the ecosystem, but also we don't know everything about every ecosystem and all the intricate connections. So even then, it's hard to say like it does nothing.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know what everything does.
I'm barely learning this. That's so cool. Okay, well, that's good to know. I'm not going to be touching mistletoe anytime soon. That's crazy. You see, I always wondered, like, because you know how sometimes you go to, like, hikes and stuff like that, and it says, like, oh, this thing is poisonous and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go and you travel, like, to, I don't know, like, somewhere, like, you don't know, like, in the wild, and there's no signs, do you kind of just have to be cautious?
Yeah, so in any ecosystem you're going into, you want to be cautious. Because we don't always know the dynamics of the ecosystem. You may, depending on the time of year, even if an area looks like, oh, it's just a bunch of leaves on the ground, you may have insects or other animals utilizing those leaves as cover, as protection, as food sources, as things like that they're hiding underneath, they're using for their nests and things like that. So you don't always just want to go off trail and like start trudging through the forest unless you absolutely have to. Survival situation.
Touch here, touch there.
But yeah, so it's always good to be cautious, not touching everything or like disturbing a lot, just because we want to be respectful of this habitat. It's someone else's home.
Yeah.
And there's a balance, a complex system here at work that we don't want to mess up with our presence. But there's also, I mean, your being able to survive and stuff is also important. So not moving at all may not be the most helpful for getting out of said ecosystem if you get into it. But yeah, if there's already trails or something like that, it's always good to stay on the trail, even if there's not markings for it, unless you're on some sort of scientific expedition that has permission and knowledge of how to navigate through stuff like that. Usually you don't want to just go wandering around disturbing the ecosystem a whole lot. But it is fun to explore. You just have to be careful, aware of what you're doing when you're doing that. So you're making the least impact, negative impact as possible when you do that. So, yeah, not gallivanting through all of the clovers and stomping out all the food source and covering all the holes for the animals living underground.
Yeah, no.
But yeah, you can still look closely at things. You can still go around on paths, and you're usually still able to see some cool stuff from paths and trails. But yeah, some of the reason they also say don't go off the trail is if you get enough foot traffic, enough people walking off the trail, it can actually start to compress the soil. Compact, is the word I was looking for. Compact or compress the soil down, so it becomes really hard and impermeable, hard to break through for animals that need to get underground, and for plants that need softer soil to grow properly, for water to get through. And that's a problem in some places where a lot of people just go off trail. They trample the plants, they trample the animals, they destroy the homes of the animals, and/or they mess with the soil, which then messes with the plants, the animals, and the water. system within. So yeah, just being careful if you're in a new place, making sure you're kind of being observant of what's around you, and then being mindful of how you're giving or taking from that ecosystem.
Nice. Well, I'll make sure I'm not touching everything
Yeah,
next time I go
definitely
in the
don't be
wild.
pulling live things off of live things. So if you see a lizard, don't be pulling its tail off. That's rude. If you see a tree, don't be picking off pieces of the live tree. Yeah, if there's leaf litter on the ground, just be aware there could be little buggies and things trying to utilize those. But yeah, just be aware, use your senses, be alert.
Use your brain.
Yeah, use common sense. But yeah, be mindful of the impact you're making. A lot of places stress the importance of leave no trace, so trying not to leave a big print of your having been there.
Yeah.
So that you're not messing up an ecosystem and a habitat and a system already there in place. But yeah, getting out there into nature is important because it helps us be more connected with the world around us, not as secluded. Gives us a better appreciation for the complexity and the creativity the wide world around us has within it. It can also give us a better appreciation for other cultures and people that have lived in some of these ecosystems we're not used to, and benefited from them.
Are you gonna say like some egg Benedict?
Oh.
I was like,
no.
I'm just kidding.
But yeah, it can also just help with your well-being, your health. Being able to be connected with nature helps with stress and things like that. But yeah, it just helps with your perspective of life and of things, and yeah, get out in nature, learn about the things around you, be open to observing them. But yeah, think about what your actions do, because they affect more than just you.
Right. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Grace. I now know a lot more about these birds, other than they have my name. Or I have, wait, hold up. I have their name.
You have their name.
Josh, you did so good. Oh, it looks so good. Ah! I love it. And the shading and everything. It's so good. It looks identical.
I don't know why I'm going like this. It looks so good. It's like my thumb is not even full. Thumbs up. There we go.
And then the egg too, the shading. It looks so good. Wait, correct me, Grace. Not the spotting. What is it called?
Speckles.
Speckles.
And you even got the gloss, which is good, because these eggs are a bit glossy and shiny. Some eggs are more matted. They don't have the gloss to them.
Like the shininess. Wow.
This is again our Alondra bird
Caw.
as she speaks.
Yeah, usually they probably aren't going to say caw. That's sort of stereotypical, like the raven or the crow in the background. But they do have a song to them. Feel free after watching this video to look up what these birds sound like, what they look like.
It's probably
in the
not
wild.
caw.
No,
No.
it's pew pew. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
But yeah, they're cool little animals. Even the simplest or drabbest, some people might say, looking animals can be really cool when you get to know them. Get to know a little more about them and see them in real life. So.
Alrighty, guys.
Cool.
Thank you for watching, and just keep an eye out because we'll do more of these in the next few weeks. But yeah, thank you for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah. Bye guys.
Bye, guys.